Zero Mark here. There's been a bunch of changes this week in Legendary Game of Heroes, so before we get to an event preview, I want to take a quick look at the changes. I think the best way to do that is to kind of compare the new cards that they just released with some of the older ones. So let's look at the things that have changed. I just want to look at this cards. I don't want to look at the battle skills yet. I want to look at the other things that have changed. So first, intensity. Used to be that they had honored intensity, Dren intensity. Intensity was type specific. Now this card has Water Slayer intensity. And I think the idea is that every Water Slayer event going forward, the decks will use Water Slayer intensities. There'll only be 10 different types of intensity instead of a whole mess of them. Because remember, every type had its own intensity. But now, you're only going to have 10 different intensities. You're going to have one for each affinity for Slayer and one for each affinity for Commander. So you'll have a Fire Commander intensity and you'll have Dark Slayer intensity, but there'll only be 10 different ones. That's designed to make it so that the future Water Slayer decks will use the same type of intensity as this deck, so it should be easier to mix and match those decks because they're using the same type of intensity. They did cap the intensity value, maximum of 300, so no more kind of crazy 2000 intensity massive nukes because they've capped intensity at 300. We'll have to see how that plays out because that seems to be limiting things in a little bit, but they've changed some other stuff to kind of counteract that, because look at what's right next. Empowered Water. This hero is empowered and does 10 times damage against fire enemies instead of standard 2 times. So all of your old water cards are now devalued because they do a base of 2 times. That all the new water cards going forward from here are going to do a base of 10 times damage against fire enemies. So 5 times better just before things even start. Before you add in any of the extra stuff, you're getting 5 times more damage on this. That's a pretty big boost and a pretty big nerf to all of the previous cards. I mean, they didn't actually nerf the previous cards. They're all the same. It's just that the new ones are going to be doing massively more damage out of the gate. But you have that cap on intensity, so that's a trade-off. So I want to look at 3 different cards and compare them, compare the old water cards against the new water cards, because I think by looking at the differences between them, we'll be able to see what they're thinking about with the changes that are being made. So first, let's look at the main event card from this event and the main event card from a Water Commander event a couple months ago. So we're looking at the old card on the left, new card on the right. Look at the difference in base stats. The base stat differential is crazy. So they massively juiced the base stats on these newer cards. So new Empowered, that gives them 5 times the damage, plus massive increase to base stats, but limited intensity. So across the board, all of these newer cards have much, much higher base stats. Switching over to the ultra rare cards, the new ultra rare cards on the left, old ultra rare card on the right. Let's look at the battle skills. The battle skill for the new card increases Water Slayer attack by up to 60% for 2 turns, and it has a cooldown of 3 turns. If you look over at the old card, it increases attack by 40%, plus 4% per intensity, and can be used every turn. And notice that the one on the right, the old card, is uncapped. So if you have 1,000 intensity, you're getting a huge attack boost, 400% plus attack boost from that. Whereas the attack boost on the new card caps out at 60, and that's when you have 400 Water Slayer intensity, or 300 Water Slayer intensity, which is the max. You can get up to 60 for 2 turns, but you can only use it every so often. So the battle skill is much, much, much weaker. So just like the stats, the base stats were much, much, much stronger. In general, they've made the battle skills much, much, much weaker. Moving on to how the relics have changed. There's some interesting new effects for the relics. The old relic used to be completely based on type, so everything was honored based. So 4 water gems, as long as there's an honor on the team, increases honored intensity. But now, you change over there and it says it creates 1 water gem per Water Slayer hero at the beginning of battle. So if you have 5 Water Slayers on your team, you're getting 5 water gems at the beginning rather than 4. and it generates Water Slayer intensity upon attack, not just every turn. So if you have turns in the middle where you're wasting time not attacking, just kind of trying to get to your next big attack, you're not going to be building up the Slayer intensity during those times that you're trying to get cooldowns to reset. And so it used to be Honored was what mattered. Now it's Water Slayer. So Water Slayer heroes and Water Slayer intensity. They also changed the last skill. It used to be 1 Water Power Gem 2 as long as an Honored's on the team. It's now 1 Water Power Gem 3 as long as an Honored is on the team. But notice it says Honored still on that one, so you still need to have the type-specific stuff. So even if you're mixing and matching different decks, you're going to have relics that match the different decks, because this last one will only work if you have an Honored on the team. So you can't just take this relic, use it in the next Water Slayer event unless you also use a card from this deck. So you'll have to be careful about how you use the relics, because they haven't completely dropped out the type requirements. They've just dropped the type requirements out of the intensity stuff and out of the water gem creation at the beginning of the event. So where does that leave us? So we've seen higher base stats, we've seen worse battle skills, and we've seen changes to the relic that make it better in terms of the number of gems it's producing, but the intensity that's coming only comes on attack, not every turn, and is limited at 300. So I'm not sure how all these things are going to work together to play out. We'll have to see how this Slayer event goes and see how this deck does in terms of damage, and see how, if we're actually able to mix and match decks. I want to try and mix and match some of my water decks together and see if using this stuff will actually work. And then it'll be 10 weeks until the next Water Slayer event, and we get to see if we can use the 2 Water Slayer decks together well or not. So the jury's still out on these changes. I'm skeptical, just because it seems like it'll take a long time to play out and figure out. And in the meantime, that 10 times boost on damage against fire enemies seems pretty huge and pretty unmatchable with the current decks. And if it really does boost damage, then that means that's going to push boss HP up and cause all sorts of other issues. So we'll see if they've actually addressed power creep. It doesn't really look like it. So that's kind of the changes that we've seen, and we'll have to see how they play out. I'm going to do a separate event preview coming up that goes over the individual battle skills in this particular deck itself, and I'll let you know what I think of that. Until next time.